Hello, this is the Fight Back podcast, hosted by exercise scientist Georgia Very. Here you'll find a series of honest conversations about martial arts and mental health. My guests and I explore the statement that every martial artist has heard: martial arts saved me. How and why do combat sports save people? Listen to find out. Today, you're going to meet the incredible Joe. Joe has now been in recovery from addiction for almost 10 years, been living a life free from unwanted violence and abuse for almost 4 years, owns a successful tattoo shop in St. Catharines, Ontario with her husband Chris, and fills the rest of her time training Muay Thai and jujitsu and making the most of every moment with her son. Chris and Joe host a weekly Zoom meeting for addiction recovery through the organisation Refuge Recovery. You are going to love this one. Everybody, welcome to the Fight Back podcast. Today I am joined by Joe. Joe is a recovering addict. She's a mum and wife and a Muay Thai practitioner. Joe, welcome to the Fight Back podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Okay, everyone, I want to start out today's conversation just talking about the nature of the topic of conversation that we're going to have. So this might be a little bit triggering for some people. We're going to talk about some dark stuff. We're going to talk about some light stuff. We were just speaking off air about the contrast between the two and how important it is. So know that this story has a happy ending, but the beginning is going to have some things that might bring up things for you, might be difficult for you to watch or listen to, depending on how you consume this show. So be gentle to yourself, take breaks, reach out to people, or anything like that that you might need to make you feel safe. You know, we're very strong on that here at the podcast. So with all that said, I want to really hand over to you to start at the beginning of telling your story.
Awesome. Thanks so much. I think that in order to properly illustrate how impactful Muay Thai and martial arts have been on my life, it is important to go through some of the definitely the darker aspects of my childhood and my young adulthood, going up to the point where I found Muay Thai. Like you said, anyone who wishes to kind of like skip or fast forward, I'm going to try to like stay away from the nitty gritty, but I think it's important to emphasize the contrast between the way my life was then and the way my life is now. So that being said, I grew up in a family with an older sister and younger brother. We had a bit of an unconventional childhood. We were homeschooled. I went to school for the first time in grade 9. And up until then, it was just me, myself, and my brother, my sister, and my mom and my dad around the house. And this was really cool for a bunch of different reasons. We were able to travel. We lived for a period of time in the States and down in Central America. We did some volunteer work and traveled quite extensively throughout Central America. And we were exposed to a lot of different ways of living, a lot of different cultures, different levels of poverty and wealth. And my parents did an amazing job of instilling this very like non-judgmental, non-discriminatory way of looking at other people in the world. And I give them a lot of credit for that. So we were very loved. We were taken care of. Just had a little bit of a quirky upbringing. And so we weren't without our struggles, though. Both my parents had some ongoing struggles with mental health. My dad especially battled severe depression and anxiety, and neither of them abused substances. But the impact of those mental health struggles really melted their way into our family dynamic at a really young age. There was frequent arguments, frequent tension. The whole kind of vibe around the house was more like walking on eggshells, not wondering or not knowing necessarily when like an outburst would happen, not knowing where was safe. not knowing whose fault that was, or whether me, like as a young child, was to blame. And when we were younger, I think I speak for all of our siblings in saying that the homeschooling was really beneficial. We were able to just like stay home and enjoy that time with the parents, and the bad stuff went over our heads somewhat. Later in life, now I've realized that even though I don't quite remember a lot of the aggression from when I was a really, really young child, it still instilled in me a lot of, I guess, like attachment issues as an adult. For myself, as soon as I started to get to an age where I was more cognizant of the tension, I began looking for a way out of it. And I started wondering why I was kept at home, and wondering why I couldn't go to school, be like the other kids, have a place to fit in, have a regular friend group, have teachers that I could go to for help, guidance counselors, like coaches, other positive adult role models that I could look up to. So I started asking to go to school. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. By that time, my family was embroiled in a lot of conflict, and I don't think they were prepared to kind of uproot the dynamic of how the kids were learning. But that just made a lot of the issues at home a lot worse. Around age 11 or 12, my mom had been experiencing domestic violence, and I started to be aware of that, and eventually the target of that violence as well. And it was around that age where I really started building a strong resentment towards the fact that I was not given, I guess, the other opportunities or supports that other kids might have. And it was like the past years of early childhood had built up this kind of just like tension and rage within me. And I started acting out a little bit, cutting myself, starting to look at any way I could to find a distraction or to leave the house. And then a lot of the feelings that I was experiencing while I was at home revolved around a loss of control. I was not allowed to necessarily make the decision for myself whether I wanted to stay at home or not. I had very limited access to like the outside world, as you could put it. And I really, and most kids have the struggle where they're looking for more control from their parents. It doesn't matter if you have a perfect like textbook upbringing or not. There's always that search for autonomy as you grow. But I got, I think I definitely really, really yearned for that. And so I didn't know where to turn. And eventually, when I was going into grade 9, the decision was made that I would end up going to high school. And it was almost as if the floodgates opened. I had tried some alcohol and drugs, just smoked weed before high school. But then going into high school, it was just like the floodgates opened and the world was my oyster. And I, all the things that I hadn't been able to do prior, I just kind of plunged into head first. And the other aspect of kind of going into like that setting was that it was really hard for me to navigate the social dynamics of high school. I had no clue how to, I just had no experience in that. I was well liked, and I had friends, and I was weird enough that people wanted to hang around with me, and charismatic enough that I wasn't a total outcast. but I was definitely drawn to the other kids that were maybe going through some difficulties or had similar situations at home, and were otherwise a little bit on the fringes of the social dynamic at the high school. And so that led to a lot of increased drug use, alcohol use, partying, really anything to distract myself from my home situation. I was still living at home at this time. My parents were going through their end stages of their divorce, so the violence and tension was at like an all-time high. And eventually I left home, dropped out of high school, and the combination of the childhood trauma and my incessant need to belong to a group of people or find my niche, find my place in the world led to just like the drug and alcohol use escalating quite quickly. Take a sip of water.
No, you're right. I think too, when we were talking about attachment, right? You mentioned attachment theory. Like for people who aren't familiar with that, it's this idea that as kids, what we need is to know that there's like a secure base that we can always go back to while we go out and explore the world. So it's like this: go away, look back at mum and dad, know that they're there, keep exploring and come back, so that you learn to be independent. Actually requires you to have like a level of love and nurturing. I'm not saying there wasn't love and nurturing, but it's such a, I don't want to say like fate written dynamic, but like to at both times have the secure base not be secure, right? To be walking on eggshells and be scared of the secure base, but then also not sent out into the world to explore, must have been just like so difficult for your young brain to comprehend. It's so far away from what would be like the ideal scenario.
For sure. I took a really long time coming to grips with how damaging that was. And because my parents were loving, they were kind, they had our best interests in mind. They wanted to do well by us. My mom cared about us immensely. We were her whole world. It just wasn't a dynamic that was healthy between her and my dad. And my dad was unwell. He didn't have the capacity to be there for us in the way that we needed. And my mom wasn't either. And after years of therapy, of course, I've realized that that secure base that you're talking about, it would have been one thing if we had been isolated to a secure base, but we were isolated to a base that was insecure and not given the opportunity or option to even access what the idea of a stable base would look like. So I went through life thinking that I had a really, really privileged childhood. And in some ways I did. But I didn't realize I didn't know what a healthy family dynamic looked like. And I think a lot of people don't, especially when you're a child, you don't have a lot of comparison when you are living in something 24/7.
Totally.
Not till a lot later that you can actually process that what you went through could have been better, or at least impacted you in some way, positively or negatively.
Definitely. And as kids, we hold ourselves as the center of the universe too. And that means that we assign fault and blame and things like that for everything that's going on to ourselves. We don't have the ability to look and say like, oh, they're struggling with their mental health. It's not that like there's something wrong with me, or that like this is just what's normal, because you don't have this other frame of reference too. So we forget Absolutely. Too, I think, how different it is, like the child brain to the adult brain.
Yeah. And you can't explain that to a child. It's really hard to explain that in words to a child or in an academic sense. You just don't get it. And if you don't have someone who has the skill to not explain it or understand the theory, but in real life, act that out as a nurturing caregiver, it's all fucked up.
Which I suppose brings us to the next part of the story.
Yeah. So I was, I think 14 or 15 when I used drugs intravenously for the first time. When I started using drugs, it was very much just a need to kind of escape my body. I didn't like real life. I needed to feel different. I was restless. I was unhappy. I didn't know what to do with the emotions that I was feeling. And so as soon as I tried getting drunk for the first time, smoking weed, doing ecstasy, cocaine, pills, as soon as I had all of those first, it was a very quick escalation to like wanting more of it. And in the most intense way possible. So unfortunately, that's where I ended up at a young age. I dropped out of school. I started to just build my life around drug use and the people who were in that circle with me. And I started to find a sense of belonging with those people for all the wrong reasons, really, like whether it be just that we were doing the same thing, so we felt accepted by each other, or we were with each other because one of the other people had something that we wanted. It was a very like toxic cycle of being around people who are going through like a really tough time. And at one point, long before I was of age to legally be doing this, I was soliciting myself for sex as one of the ways that I would make money. And I had an encounter with someone that turned violent when he wasn't going to pay. And for the most part, throughout all of this like chaos, I was pretty naive to a lot of the dangers that came along with the lifestyle I was living. Apart from family violence and domestic struggles, I hadn't experienced kind of being the brunt of any violence out in the real world. I was like kind of just really naively like selling drugs, selling my body, doing IV drugs, not being responsible about it, and really paying no heed to any of the consequences for myself or the kind of pain and suffering that I was causing for my family. I had less and less contact with all of them as time went on, and as I got more and more wrapped up in my own thing that I was doing. But when this encounter happened, that turned violent, it was terrifying. Like I just felt an overwhelming sense of powerlessness and weakness. I didn't feel like I could do anything about the situation. I felt stupid. Like, how could I put myself there? And I was like, for a good like hour or so, very like shook up about it, and then couldn't handle that, so I went right back to using. And I just shoved that memory into like a little box and chucked it over my shoulder and went on with my life of just avoidance, basically trying to stay away from that fear and that helplessness, and in any way that I could. So fast forward a little bit, I decided to leave my hometown where I had gone to high school. A girlfriend of mine, and myself, we hitchhiked across the country out to British Columbia. And our idea was to just kind of go for the summer. You do some odd jobs, see the country, be a little like vagabonds, and then come back. I had never been out of Ontario before that, apart from the traveling I had done with my family. So I went to Canada, and I thought it was a good way to do it. And a big part of me was like really needing to run away from where I was. I had been there for most of my life. And I had all this kind of like compounded trauma that had happened in this area. So and I knew that I wasn't behaving like safely, or like deep down, I knew that I probably wasn't on like the healthiest path. So this was almost an excuse for me to try and change my ways. So we headed out west. We got there without issue, and then my friend had to leave. She went back home to Toronto. She had a personal issue come up, and she left. I wasn't ready to go back. I was definitely like just not prepared to kind of make the trek back, and I had nothing left for me in Ontario. I had to kind of try my luck out west, and I met someone. It was another guy who was traveling, homeless. He was busking on the street when I met him, and we ended up just kind of like latching onto each other. And what turned into like me wanting to stay for an extra week, 2 weeks, month, turned into 4 years or so of kind of living a very like transient lifestyle on kind of in and out of shelters, in and out of temporary housing, kind of floating around from different jobs to other jobs. And the whole time, both him and I were in active addiction, and trying to stay one step ahead of whatever trouble we had gotten ourselves into. I say this without judgment towards him, because I know that I was a very unhealthy person at the time as well, but our relationship very quickly turned into a very toxic and abusive relationship as well. I think that it definitely took the two of us to continue the cycle, but he was struggling just as much as I was, and the mixture of that with the like drug use, financial struggles, stress of different things happening. Like I was pregnant, I got an abortion. He had warrants out for his arrest, so we were constantly just like bouncing from place to place. And I ended up getting arrested and charged with trafficking as well. So all of these things just kind of, and the fact that we both came from like fucked up childhoods with no proper modeling of any sort of relationship just led to this 4 years of us being absolutely awful to each other, but not able to leave. We were the other person's kind of only lifeline, I guess. So yeah, our relationship was violent. He was physically abusive. He hit me. There were times, and it's taken me like a lot of gumption to be able to say this over the years, but he raped me. I used to trick myself into thinking that didn't happen, considering we were in a relationship, and there's a whole slew of excuses I could tell myself that I would try to use to convince myself it didn't happen. But it did. And all of those encounters that I had with him only fed into this strong feeling of being helpless, worthless, not deserving any better, being entirely out of control of the situation that I was in. And I had a lot of instances over those years with him, and with other people, that just made me feel completely out of control of myself, and out of control of any situation I was in. I always had a little bit of like a fantasy about like being able to fight back and like be the one to like get myself out of a situation, or like use violence and like be the one who finally like comes out on top.
Yeah.
But I was like super unfit. I was treating my body like shit. I was eating like shit, under like so much stress. I could barely, walk around the block without, or like, take a bike ride without being crazy out of breath. So it was nice to think about those things, but in reality, they definitely were not happening.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess there's a couple points, a couple of really low points that I've just illustrated, where it would have made sense for me to say, all right, this life isn't for me anymore. I need to find help. I need to leave. I need to stop what I'm doing. I can't use drugs anymore. But none of those things, I wasn't ready to do any of those things. And the way that I had grown up, and my self-perception had been shaped up until that point, really led me to believe that I was undeserving of anything better than that. And the dynamic of the relationship that I was in, where I had like attached myself so strongly to this very harmful individual, played a lot into my next relationship with my son's father. And now looking back, I can just like jump step by step back to seeing the relationship with that I had with my dad, and that my dad had with my mom, and how I witnessed my mom putting up with things that she shouldn't have for a very, very long time, all the while being told that, or being shown that was normal, and that was something that you accept, and something that you work through with someone if you love them. And lacking that secure attachment as a child, having a romantic partner that was all in, saying that he loves me, and being one of the first like adult men to I guess like position themselves in a place where they were kind of my caretaker, gave this like very like false sense of safe attachment. So it was really, really hard for me to give that up. And along with him, obviously, we're both kind of in active addiction, just came like continuous drug use. And if I was with him, there wasn't any chance of me getting clean, or changing. So eventually I did get to the point where I had exhausted all of the strength that I had left to stay. And I had seen the pattern that was happening now for years and years and years. And I did get strength to leave. And so I ended up hitchhiking back to Ontario. I didn't go through any detox or official rehab or go to any like therapy or have any professional help as I was getting clean. So I just went through this kind of like absolutely miserable period of withdrawal as I was hitchhiking back home to Kingston. And I didn't look back. Like I didn't have thoughts of, at this point, I didn't look back. There were other times. One time I even flew home to Ontario with the thought of not returning to BC. Mm-hmm. And within a couple of days, I had used the last of my money to get back to BC and was using again, and broke my mother's heart, I'm sure, mm-hmm. to see me go back. But this time I had no will left to put myself back in a situation to be with my ex and to be putting myself through such harm on a day-to-day basis. So I arrived back in Ontario, mm-hmm. And was clean. And very, very soon after, within a couple months after, I decided that it would be best for me just to abstain from everything. So I stopped smoking, I stopped drinking alcohol, stopped smoking weed. I could see that anything was a gateway to kind of going back to my old life. And some of the people that I still knew in Kingston had heard that I had come back to town, and anything that they wanted to do kind of revolved around substance use anyway. So I was trying really hard to stick to myself. I had one really close friend that I moved in with, and I started my life fresh with her. So when I did that, I wasn't necessarily aware of the support that was there for people who were going through what I was going through. Mm-hmm. I could have definitely benefited from a lot of it and a lot of the resources that I refer people to now. Mm-hmm. But instead, I just kind of, again, like shoved it in a little box, tossed it over my shoulder, decided I wasn't going to think about that part of my life anymore. I got a job. I started working out. Mm-hmm. I started going to the gym, running. I started thinking about what I was eating. I wouldn't say that I started eating healthily, because I started watching my calories. I started really, really restricting what I was eating, mm-hmm. Being very meticulous about controlling that aspect of my life. Mm-hmm. And it was like, okay for the time being, because it gave me something else to focus on. Yep. It filled my time, it filled my days completely. And in my mind, it was a positive alternative to the way that my life had been in the past. And it was a gateway into the fitness world. Just the fact that I was buying running shoes and like going for a run, or buying a gym membership and trying to understand like how to lift weight properly and just getting my body moving was a wonderful step in the right direction. So shortly after I started all that, I met my son's father. Mm-hmm. His name is Matt. And he had recently gotten sober as well. Mm-hmm. So here I am, like fresh, raw, newly, super vulnerable, and really kind of excited about the path that my life is taking. Mm-hmm. And without most of the old people that I had in my life. So when I met him, the exact same thing happened that had happened previously, where someone paid attention to me. They were at that point in time doing the exact same thing that I was doing with my life, starting to get sober, starting to work out, and starting to basically try to align themselves on a better path. So I went and I just like latched myself onto him again and did the same to me. And six years later, I found myself again leaving a very, very manipulative and abusive relationship that took a lot out of me. So while I was with him, I had my son. He's 7 now. His name's Ezra. He's almost 8. And I started a tattoo shop. I got a car. I started going to school right before I got pregnant. And I was actually in a course to be a child and youth worker. And then when I had my son, I kind of had a little bit of a choice to make. I couldn't balance tattooing and going to school, and financially it made a little bit more sense for me to stick with tattooing as my son was younger. And schedule wise too, it's very flexible when you're dealing with a young child. So I went that route. We ended up building a really successful shop in Kingston. But throughout this time, it was just thing after thing after thing that we were reaching for. So it was school, it was the pregnancy, getting married, now then building the shop. And we had all these, buying my first car, getting my driver's license, all of these really good things. But I paid very little attention to anything that was going on internally. I was clean and sober. I wasn't using any drugs or alcohol still, and him and I throughout our whole relationship were sober, which is wonderful. But we really didn't pay any attention to any of the underlying issues that we both had going on. When we first met, actually, I guess I should mention this. We were just getting to know each other and chatting a bit about our backgrounds and kind of how we came to be where we were. And I had mentioned that I had this history of heavy drug use, and he said the same for alcohol for him. And he never really had much drug use. And I had mentioned that I used intravenously, and he just looked at me and he had this scorn in his voice and in his eyes, and he's like, "Oh, really? Like, that's disgusting. Like, I don't know why anyone would do that. That's I just don't understand. Like, I can't imagine that." So I just kind of like closed my mouth, and it reaffirms every thought that I had that like I should be ashamed of myself and ashamed of my actions, and that I didn't have anyone to relate to. Initially, I had been excited to find someone who could kind of understand the struggle I had been through, and kind of like work with me side by side as I wanted to improve my life. But as soon as he said that, I was just like, "Oh, wow, okay, so you don't talk about that. Like, that's just not something you talk about." I guess everybody in recovery has the same opinion, and so I must be especially fucked up. Like, there must not be anyone like me in recovery who has gone through the same thing, which now of course I know is like the farthest thing from the truth. So throughout our whole relationship, I kind of had this facade almost of being someone that I wasn't to an extent. And as the issue started to arise in our relationship and his controlling side became more apparent, and my depression and anxiety got to be unmanageable, I started asking myself a lot more questions about those things, and looking at more options for support. So I started doing therapy. And yeah, during that therapy, it was like a good gateway for me to understand that I wasn't alone, and that there is support for people like me, and that the things that I was experiencing in my relationship, although they weren't physical violence, were super manipulative and definitely considered abuse, which was another hard pill for me to swallow, because I had gone from a physically and very like a visually abusive relationship to a different type of abuse that's a lot quieter, a lot more hidden, and a lot more kind of like quietly manipulative than physical violence. So, starting to lighten the mood a bit.
Yes.
I was tattooing a client one day, and when was this? I would say it was after I had my son, who was born in 2014. So I'm guessing maybe like 2015, 2016. I was tattooing this client, and she was telling me about this class that she was taking, which ended up being a Muay Thai class. And my interest was piqued right away. I was so excited. I told her that I had always wanted to try something like that. I just hadn't known where to start, and didn't have anybody really to kind of guide me in the right direction. She had really good things to say about the instructor. She was a beginner. She wasn't very experienced. So she was a good kind of gauge for me to be comfortable going into a class. So she took me with her one time to try it out. And I was obsessed. I was absolutely in love. It was the most like rudimentary beginner's class ever. I didn't know how to do anything, didn't know how to throw a punch. Of course, I thought I was like super tough, but like I had no idea how to like do any proper technique. And I discovered that despite all the running and cardio and weightlifting that I had been doing, I was still so unfit when it comes to the world of martial arts. So I had this like incredible workout. I was like on the verge of puking, like just so ecstatic for the chance to be able to like hit something. And I was still in my previous relationship, and under like a fair bit of stress. I hadn't quite figured out that I was finished with it. So I was internalizing a lot, and the excuse to be able to take that frustration and rage and all of the negativity that had compounded over the last couple of years, and just feel totally like the biggest weight had been lifted off my shoulders after I left that first class, had me completely hooked. So I continued going to that gym for a little bit. I tried a couple of jujitsu classes. I liked it, but I was really hooked on Muay Thai. There was so much to learn, and going into the two disciplines at the same time, I felt like I would have been way over my head. And I wanted to really like apply myself properly to one. So I picked Muay Thai. I started going all the time. I would train like 3-4 times a week. And I had a young child at home, so getting out that much was hard.
Yeah.
But it was my saving grace. If I didn't have a good day, if I was struggling at home, if I didn't know how to process the emotions and kind of manipulation that I was facing at home, I would go to class and everything went out the window. I was only focused on my breathing, my technique, getting through the workout, working with your partner, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I loved Muay Thai and the more invested I got into it, there was this spark in me that I think was a little bit foreign to my ex-partner. And it scared him. And he saw that I was really like interested and invigorated by something. Mm-hmm. And the Joe that he had met that really like put aside everything else in my life to like attend to the relationship and bend over backwards to make things work and make things be copacetic, started to pull back a bit and gain a little bit of strength in terms of recognizing how good I felt when I had left a Muay Thai class, and how awful I felt when I was subjected to some of the stuff that he was doing. And for the first time I had the comparison of, oh, wow, like this is what it feels like to do something for myself, to feel like validated by doing well at something, to learn something new and be given credit for it. And when I started getting that from other people and other situations, I started realizing that he was actually not giving me any of that support. And the more I realized it, the more he began to panic, I guess, when he realized that I was like slipping out from underneath his thumb a little bit. And things got much worse quickly. It got to the point where he made such a big deal of the fact that I was leaving the house to go to Muay Thai, that I was leaving my family, that I should be staying at home and taking care of our son, that eventually I stopped going. I didn't, even though I felt so good, I was still just kind of like trapped in the relationship. And at that point in time, I had a really young child, and I was like, all right, maybe he's right. Like, I work with my hands. I have to take care of my son, and I'm taking this time to do something good for myself. Like, who do I think I am?
No, but yes, I think that's so common too.
Yeah, it's for sure. And it took a year of me then totally neglecting myself and just, trying my damn hardest to make things work, until it just really clicked that it wasn't my fault. And like nothing that I would ever do would be good enough. And the absolutely like atrocious. Oh geez, I have braces, so sometimes I have a lisp.
It's a hard word anyway, I think.
The abuse that I was experiencing was totally unacceptable. My son was growing older. He was starting to see stuff and hear stuff, and I was just getting to the end of my rope with it. So before I left my then husband, I decided to go back to Muay Thai. And I started training again. The coach that I had been with previously left the province. He moved out east. So I found another coach who had quite a bit more experience specifically with Muay Thai. He only did Muay Thai and was training some fighters from the local other gyms. They would do like their other conditioning and jujitsu and boxing and stuff elsewhere, and then just come to him for like specific stand-up and Muay Thai training. so it was a really like intimate environment. The gym was this like ancient, amazing, like awful smelling place.
Yes, we all know the type.
Yeah. The floors were carpet, and the walls were completely covered with like fight posters from and like 70s, 80s, 90s. And he had like the like canvas bags still, like the big like heavy canvas bags. And it was really comfortable. I felt like I could go there. What happened there kind of stayed there. I was able to train and not necessarily like run into people from the gym or have to really like associate with anyone else that might cross my path. And my love for the sport just kind of became refueled. And as I was training with him, I managed to come to the point where I wanted a divorce. I left. I left the business that I had with my ex completely to him. I just took my tattoo machines and my equipment and my son, and I just walked away from everything. And just once again started fresh. But this time I wasn't going to give up Muay Thai. So I've been training since then. I think I started with him in 2017, I want to say. So I've been training consistently since then. I've had the one fight. I've been to Thailand. I've switched trainers and coaches quite a bit because I've actually moved cities since then as well. And I just like to experience whatever different people have to offer style wise or experience wise. I'll take a short break from talking.
I was gonna say with the start we're like, okay, we'll make it into a conversation, but I just really felt like you were flowing really well. It's amazing up until this point, but like now we can definitely dig into some like more Muay Thai specific stuff. So like fighting, I think, is always such a big step up and difference, right, in terms of what your training is like. Your training shifts from going to have fun and let off steam and whatever, and then it becomes very, okay, like got to do diet and the running and like be fit enough for the fight and start to think about like a game plan and all that stuff. Like what sort of a fighter do you kind of feel like you were in your first fight? Let's just start with the first fight. Of course, like everyone wants to grow, but what kind of fighter? Were you like going out just like no game plan, just like swinging like crazy, high intensity, or were you like a measured fighter? Or like what kind of fighter did you see yourself in that first fight?
Oh my gosh. So first fight and only fight so far. And I had a game plan. I think but it didn't last for too long. And so I'll back up just a tiny bit. So I met my husband, Chris, 2018. And one of the things that we kind of instantly bonded over was Muay Thai. I had been trained prior to meeting him, obviously, and he had been training for a number of years at that point. I want to say probably, I think maybe around 6 or 7 years he had been training. And so I met this guy who was sober, into Muay Thai. And like instantly we just like bonded and clicked. And I had been at a point where, like, kind of learning from experience from my past relationships, I was very much like focused on healing, focused on like parenting my son, and doing things that I had been kind of like forced to give up in the past. So I went into meeting him with like a very, very strong sense of wanting to like remain the person that I wanted to be. and there was like a little bit of fear and hesitation in terms of not wanting to be vulnerable or open myself up again. But like with him, it was just inevitable. Like we were like just instantly compatible, and his kind of like emotional knowledge from his own lived experience, and the person he is too. He's a very compassionate, kind, understanding, and giving person. Really lent me the comfort and security that I needed to be able to like pull my walls down a bit, and actually engage in a relationship in a healthy way where we could both kind of grow and experience the things that we wanted to experience. And Muay Thai was a huge part of that. So we obviously started like training together as soon as we met. And he introduced me to some of his gyms and trainers that he had been working with. And we fought on the same card that night. And so that's one thing that we promised that we would never do again, is fight on the same card with each other. Yeah, it was bad. And it was cool preparing for it together. It was awesome to be able to like diet together and do all the things that you had mentioned. Like, you know, be conscious about our weight, like bump up the training a bit, like strategize, panic, all of the above.
Yes.
Yeah. And, but then when it came to the actual night, he was headlining the event, and I was earlier in the night. And so he spent the majority of his night just like helping me warm up and kind of like being by my side. And just the person he is, he's so like caring, and giving that like all of his attention was on me up until maybe like 2 fights before he had to perform. So we just like promised each other that we would like 100% fight separately, and so that the other person could like do all the caring and the fighter could do the fighting, and that way it's just like a lot more clear cut and less stress, but also it's like fantastic to have your partner be able to be like as into it as you are.
Yeah, I think like maybe not being on the same card, but being as into it as you are is that like nice sweet spot. I know in my relationship, we've really, I don't think we've never fought on the same card. And so my partner does jujitsu and I do Muay Thai. So that's been a big part of it. But I've competed in jujitsu and he's competed in Muay Thai, as to be like, cool. We'll step into each other's worlds kind of thing. But I always feel like when I'm prepping for a fight, that's when I become really like my most selfish, you know, like everything is about my diet, my training, like all these things that I'm doing. I really lean on him for support. I need that. And that's why I like to flip it back and forth, because I feel kind of guilty, right? I'm like, oh, everything has been about me until this like fight. And then now it's like, okay, I'll take some time off fighting, which I think is good too, because you can't always be prepping for fights. And we'll prep you for a fight, you know, let's prep you for a Muay Thai fight, or let's prep you for a jiu-jitsu comp, or like whatever it's been. I think it's a good balance.
Yeah, I think that's a really, really good idea, because you have to be selfish and put your all into it. And it's totally like, it makes sense to feel guilty about that when you're in it and like fully focused and not really having much room for anything to like distract from that. Yeah, so like having the balance of like being able to do that for each other is really cool.
How did you feel in the ring?
In the ring, I was really excited. I wasn't too nervous. I had no idea what to expect. It was like easy for me to make weight. I wasn't really like cutting that much weight or anything. So I felt physically fine. I I wasn't nervous going in, but then as you like started to walk up and get in the ring and like get ready, then your heart starts pounding a bit and a lot. And as soon as, oh, it just said I was about to raise my hand. Weird. As soon as like it was go time, like everything I learned just completely went out the window.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't even know where the rounds went. Like I don't even know what happened during that time.
Yeah.
It was messy and like, I mean, I got through it, but like it was pretty techniqueless. I ended up like winning, but I didn't feel good about it. Like as soon as I stepped out of the ring, I was like, oh wow, I can't believe I just did that.
Really?
Yeah, I was like, oh my god, I could hear my coach like yelling stuff, and I just like wasn't doing any of it. And as soon as I left, I was like, fuck, I could have done so much better. But it was fun. I like wanted to do another one right away. I ended up breaking my hand, so I had like quite a bit of a hiatus, not in the fight.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, no, fight. I was skateboarding with my son and trying to show off. And
that makes more sense. I was thinking about like the amount of wrapping that they do with your hands and then like taping it into the glove. I was like, wow, how did you break a hand in a fight? That does make more sense.
Yeah. No padding and like a harsh fall on pavement. So
yeah, that'll do it. It's always the non-fighting things too. You're like, I wish I could have like some cool like fighting based injury. It's like, no, I fell over and then now I can't compete or train.
It's awful. Yeah, I've definitely learned my lesson. Full pads now every time I go to skateboard with my son.
That's it. And when you're doing Muay Thai.
And when I'm doing Muay Thai, yes, definitely. Yeah.
I think, it's interesting how so much of like your story has like the molecule, what we would call dopamine, like involved in it. I suppose it's been an interest of mine more recently, is like learning about how dopamine impacts our decision making, and that it's like really about motivation and drive and like trying to do things rather than a reward molecule, which I think is like kind of the rap that it's got. So like for anyone listening, it's like, you eat chocolate, you get dopamine, you have sex, you get dopamine, you do drugs, you get dopamine. And that like the dopamine is the reason why people will chase after all of those things, right? Healthy and unhealthy things, is because your brain rewards you. But that your brain really rewards you a lot for the pursuit of the thing. It gives you some after the thing, but most of it is the pursuit of the thing, and then a drop in dopamine after that to put your body into equilibrium, which feels like the pain of not having the thing, which is not really painful. It's more just like an itch, like a kind of like a tap on the shoulder being like, do that thing again. Which, like escalates into giving you less and less and less dopamine, but giving you more and more and more discomfort from not getting the dopamine. And of course, what we call that is addiction, right? And that is chemically, that's what's happening with addiction. But it plays out in so many facets of our life. For you in the beginning, it was drugs, and then it was like exercise. Like I'm in pursuit of planning my exercise and doing the exercise and controlling my calories, and like then it's ticking life things off, like gonna get a car, gonna go to school, gonna get married, like always looking forward. And I love how it was Muay Thai that was like, okay, now I'm noticing how I feel in my body, like I'm being in my body, and that's giving me pause to contemplate all of the things that are going on in my life.
That's a huge, huge thing for me as well. So the being in your body, there's a couple of points I would love to touch on. The dopamine one is excellent. I love that you talk about that, and I think it's super interesting to notice the positive and the negative things that you can chase. and how even though it has a dopamine reaction, and I'm sure like you get that training, or like, you know, learning something new or meeting someone new, like it doesn't necessarily mean that what am I trying to say here? You can get those there for positive and negative things.
Totally.
So to like discern which ones will lead you down a very unhealthy path, and which ones in moderation can help you flourish and grow, is super cool. So there's that I want to touch on quickly and talk about some of the like addiction recovery stuff that I started to do as I like around like 6 or 7 years clean and sober. And then being in your body when you are doing Muay Thai, you can't not be in your body. Like if you're in your head and if you're thinking about stuff too much, if you're like trying to memorize a combination, or like panicking about what your partner's going to be doing, or like giving yourself shit, or telling yourself you need to do something better or whatever. If you're in your head, I've run into this so many times where you're just not like, the things don't work properly to be able to like flow and like be the best, I guess, like Muay Thai practitioner that you can be. I find that experience of like being in your body, being grounded, being present, and not worrying about past or future is like 100% imperative. And just like over the last couple of years, I learned that I've been like very heavily dissociative, as like all through childhood, all through my whole life, and like up until kind of going through some like trauma therapy, and kind of learning how to like rein that in a little bit and become more grounded. But during Muay Thai, during like a physical kind of like such a intense physical exertion, and I guess like strenuous task that you're putting your body through, like there's really not a lot of room to be like outside of your body. It really forces you to breathe. It forces you to feel what's happening in your body. And it's true. Like it gave me those moments of stillness where I was able to reflect on how I felt and how distant and far away I felt from myself when I was in those other situations.
So interesting that that's how it was for you. It's different. And I think it highlights just how everybody's experience with different things, with trauma, is so different. Is dissociation super common? I think that's something that most people who are experiencing it either don't realize that they are, or think that it's only them. And anyone who doesn't have experience with it just doesn't realize how many of the people that you interact with may be like having a lot of the time out of body experiences. And it's interesting to me that Muay Thai pulled you away from dissociating and kept you present. It's not always like that. Some people will exercise and that triggers them to dissociate because their heart rate goes up. It physiologically in their body feels a lot like a stress response, and they go, this is too much, I'm gonna leave. And I've had clients who've got injured from trying to do more martial arts and not having an awareness of that in the beginning, right? So they get injured because they're not paying attention to their body. It's not that they're daydreaming and they don't have a choice. They separate from their body and they can't control how hard they work, how hard their partner goes. And I really think it just highlights how different everybody is. You know, for some people, you can recognize that, then work with a therapist and then use a martial art to help you practice it. For some people, it's just like immediate relief. And then that's the trigger to like work on all sorts of different things too. And I love that. I think it's great that it's not like everyone who does this thing equals this thing. Like, that's not human.
Yeah, absolutely. We're so unique and different, and everyone's experience is so different. And that's a cool reason behind having all these different voices on your podcast, is being able to hear those different perspectives and you know, hopefully there's something from my story that people will be able to relate to, but guaranteed there's stuff that, you know, some won't relate to, and they might be someone else on your podcast that is a little bit of a better fit. Another kind of interesting thing I thought of while you were explaining that is that, so when my life at home was awful, going to the gym and doing Muay Thai was like my relief, and gave me that in-body grounding experience. A couple years into being with Chris, where like everything's meshing, we are both like actively engaged in therapy. My son is safe, I'm safe, I have like the best living situation possible. I'm training Muay Thai all the time. I've done the fight, I think, at this point. And like also started doing a lot more addiction targeted therapy, kind of looking at and coming to terms with that part of my life, and being able to speak with Chris about it on like an open and non-judgmental playing field, rather than the shame that had kind of been put on me before. As things started to really come together in my personal life, there were times during training where it became almost like training was now my safe place to like fall apart. So I went from always being like on the ball, like never missing a beat, always being really like sharp and like feeling good in my body during Muay Thai, to having panic attacks when I was training, to being in the midst of like, not even sparring, just like drilling or like light pad work, and have to like stop because you know, I can't breathe, or I would start to panic or have like a like out of body reaction. And I was so confused. I was like, what the hell is going on? Like, I don't understand this. Like, everything is great, and like suddenly I can't do the one thing that I've always counted on to make me feel better. And the more I do it, the more detached from myself I feel. I was like, well, something is going on here that I need to pay attention to. And so right around that time, I started working with another amazing therapist. And I was explaining all this to him, and I was having really like a lot of like panic attacks at home, a lot of like paranoia, some like bouts of depression that were really bad, like just a really, really like oddly rough time in my life mentally, even though everything else around me was wonderful. And that's when we landed on the complex PTSD diagnosis. And I was able to kind of pull the pieces of the puzzle together and really like dig into and understand not only the impact that a lot of the childhood and kind of compounding relationships had on me, and life in active addiction, but also learn a bit more about how your body and nervous system actually functions during those things and after, when able to like properly process the trauma. And so that spurred that treatment on, and that was maybe about 2 years ago now. And I'm happy to say that I don't have panic attacks anymore when I'm training. Occasionally in real life, but it's still a work in progress.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love how you said, you know, that I was dissociating, I was having panic attacks, I couldn't breathe, and it felt like it was for no reason. And that made me think, well, what is my body trying to tell me? I think that as a question is possibly one of the most powerful questions we can ask ourselves. What is my body trying to tell me right now? I feel anxious. I feel angry. I feel scared. This, like, things are happening that seem maybe unexplainable or not initially explainable, because our logic brains always want to assign meaning to things, but it's our deeper reptilian brain that's the brain that is doing things by muscle memory and on autopilot and protecting us, to ask, oh, well, what is my body trying to tell me? Like, what is my body trying to say? What's happened? And to listen to that wisdom, because there is so much. And like, look where it guided you. I think it's a question that can guide everybody to an improvement in their life, trauma or not.
I completely agree. Yeah, I absolutely agree. And almost like live by that statement now.
Yeah. And it's something that's not that easy, too. I think we talk a lot about, well, feel your body and like notice what your body's feeling. And not everyone feels their body all the time. We just spoke at length about dissociation. It means you don't feel your body, and it can be difficult to do that. And that's why I think, just like you've done, working with a therapist is so useful, because they can help you develop the tools to be able to do that. And, you can start to feel the body to then ask the question, oh, okay, well, now I know what I'm feeling. What does it mean? What might it mean? And what can I do to soothe myself and to make myself safe?
And another very critical piece of information that I learned was that, so I was feeling my body too much, or it felt like it was too much. It was overwhelming. I was having like attacks of paranoia and anxiety, and it was making me question my life around me. Like, I was questioning myself. I was questioning like whether I was making the right decisions on things. And I was looking at my, what you would say, like gut feeling as being my compass. And then what was really, really, really crucial for me to understand was that those feelings that were happening in my body, of the anxiety and paranoia and depression, were feelings that had stayed almost like trapped in my central nervous system from all this trauma. So it wasn't a reaction to what had happened in the moment. It wasn't a reaction to the pad work or sparring. It wasn't a reflection of my internal compass guiding me the wrong way. It was this like massive mountain of trauma that didn't have room to be buried in my body anymore, coming out. So I hope that more people ask themselves, when they feel the panic or the anxiety or the depression, not what it is that they're doing in the moment that could change, but maybe ask themselves if there's something in the past that they need to address. Because I think a lot of us, and I know I was really, really good at just like compartmentalizing and like shoving stuff away and pretending like it didn't exist. And at some point, your body will force you to pay attention to it. But if you don't have the tools or support to guide you in the right direction, of maybe you need like trauma therapy, or maybe there's like something, a little bit deeper that you need to dig into, then it can be really frustrating to experience these symptoms that are like at times debilitating, and not know where they're coming from, or question yourself left, right, and center, even when in your day-to-day life you're doing everything right.
Totally. And of course, like that's in your life, the model of like things that are causing me to feel anxious and stressed was like, I'm running from the cops. I'm like living from home to home. I'm like doing all of these stressful things. They must be the things that are causing the stress, and to then take them away. And I think that that's very normal. Like we said, our brains are so logical. We want to look for reasons. If you feel stressed, you want to be like, or my partner's stressing me out, or they're doing something wrong, or like, or I'm on XYZ wrong. We want to look for reasons, and often blame, like immediate blame that we can assign things that are going on with. And it often is a question of, well, there's so much more that it could be. You are not your thoughts too. Your thoughts come a millisecond after your body feels a sensation. Your body habitually feels the anxiety and stress and panic that's been trapped in your body for so long. And then a millisecond later, your brain goes, oh, I'm anxious because so-and-so did so-and-so, right? This is happening.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
That millisecond is so powerful. And I do think that is one of the ways that, like, Muay Thai and doing anything that really engages your body helps you to put, and maybe an extra couple of milliseconds into that millisecond. Some of the time too, like, nobody's perfect with that all of the time. Like, I'm definitely not perfect with that all of the time, of course, but you get a little bit more occurrences of being able to go like, this is what my body's doing. I'm going to interject before I have the thought. It's much like, somebody hits me and I like cover up to block it. I want to have maybe a millisecond to think about what I'm going to fire back sometimes, in a fight. Sometimes I'm just like on autopilot being like, oh, you hit me, I'm going to hit you straight back. And that's useful too, because it's quicker, right? You've got to have a balance of those two. You can't always be rationally thinking things. It's so energy intensive to use the neocortex, the most recently developed part of your brain that does critical thinking, because it uses a lot of calories. It uses a lot of energy. It's exhausting to think critically. We want to think like on autopilot sometimes.
Yeah. I mean, I guess that would make sense why there's equal amounts of physical and mental preparation going into a competition or a fight like that.
Totally. I want to come back to what you said a little bit earlier about going through like some of the resources, the things that you did regarding to addiction, things that might be available to people that they could do, or that you have found to be beneficial.
Okay. Well, so I mentioned before, I kind of didn't use anything at the very beginning. I went cold turkey. It's possible. I'm living proof of that, but it's really, really hard to go through something without the support and resources that are available.
Is it true that you can die from that? Is that true? Can you die from withdrawal?
From withdrawals? I'm not sure. I know you can die from specific types of opiates. I think like benzos. You can have like a fatal withdrawal from. I don't think you can have a fatal withdrawal from like heroin, morphine. It's awful, but I don't think it's fatal. I could be wrong though. I should know, but I don't.
I don't know about should. I mean, that's where I was like, I've got that in my head, and I don't know whether it's like a wives' tale or it's just like something that someone said, like it feels like you could, and then it's become, or whether you literally could. But I think either way, you want to get help with that.
You get really, really, really sick regardless. And there's like medical assistance that is available for that now, where it can be a little bit more comfortable. But even if it's not opiates that you're talking about, like if it's alcohol, drugs, or even if it's like abstinence from gambling, sex, like overspending, overeating, or any sort of like food related disorder, a lot of the process and supports are similar. So I didn't discover the 12-step meetings until after I met my husband, Chris. He showed me into the first one. We were going for a friend's celebration of their like sober-versary, I guess. I think it was a year celebration. And so I had never been in a room like that before. And I had a little bit of a skewed perception of it. I was a little bit judgmental in thinking like maybe I didn't belong there, or that like it was just like a bunch of like old guys that like do nothing but like drink coffee and like hang around in a church basement. It's not. Everybody from all walks of life, and guaranteed, if you're struggling with any sort of addiction, there's a meeting for like almost everything. And the sense of just being in a room with a number of people who are able to relate to you in some sense, and sharing that with this like room full of people who are all there for the same purpose is incredibly powerful. And I know Chris used AA and NA and CA as like a very big part of his addiction recovery.
Mm-hmm.
It was really helpful for him at the beginning. It's not helpful for everyone. And there are different avenues to take. Like you can do individual counseling,
Mm-hmm.
reach out to different like outpatient therapies. And Chris and I run or I guess we host a recovery meeting
Mm-hmm.
that is with an organization called Refuge Recovery.
Mm-hmm.
And it is based around the principles of Buddhism. And so it's looking at recovery from addiction of all sorts. So
Mm-hmm.
drug, alcohol, food, etc. But just based around like principles of mindfulness and compassion. And there's a lot of meditation included, a lot of learning to live with like the present moment and being in touch with yourselves, being of service. And it's, I have more experience with that specific meeting than I do with the 12-step meetings.
Mm-hmm.
But from my experience of it, it's very inclusive, very non-judgmental, and a very easy place to get some sort of support. And there's a plethora of resources if you just kind of look for it. It can be really confusing to know where to start. But if you go to or attend any of these meetings, or if you speak to like any of your local resources, there should be like a list of like local specific people or places that you can speak with. Yeah.
Do you guys have any plans to offer, what is it called? Sorry, Refuge?
Refuge Recovery. Yeah.
To offer Refuge online?
Yeah. So it actually is online
Okay.
currently. Yeah. The meeting that we started hosting it during all the lockdowns,
Mm-hmm.
being very like intensive here. So no one was allowed to see each other in person.
Mm-hmm.
We hope to soon offer it in a bit of a hybrid style where it's in person and online. But right now it is a Zoom meeting. So it's accessible for everybody all around the world as long as you have Zoom.
Mm-hmm.
6 p.m. Wednesdays, Eastern Standard Time.
Okay. So 9 a.m. here in Melbourne.
Yeah, that's not bad.
It's not bad. That's doable. Totally doable. What's that? Well, we'll put the link to how to access I guess you guys have a site or something like that. I'll get you to give it to me later, and we'll put all the details for if anyone would like to join in with those Zoom sessions, and some other resources as well for anyone who maybe listens to this and decides that they do want to, work on their addiction, or even, I think, gain additional perspective into like addiction doesn't have to be like rock bottom, whatever that means for you, or like using drugs for it to be negatively impacting your life, and for it to be something that you want to work on and grow through. Really? Like you mentioned, food addictions, spending addictions, like you can be addicted to any number of things, and society doesn't see them as sinister, but they can be just as all-consuming in changing how you perceive yourself and your experience of life. So I think, for anyone who thinks that that's kind of them, or the dopamine stuff kind of resonates with them, like it's a good time to get on it,
For sure. And I like what you said about it being less sinister, because it's harder for people to recognize that they're doing something that could be harmful or could be considered an addiction when it's totally like shoved in your face all the time, like shopping, online shopping. I'm guilty of it. Like, clicking that little stupid Amazon button all the time. And not to like put it lightly or whatever, or make a joke, but there's a lot of things that are considered like totally normal and a part of our society that can absolutely become troublesome or become like a burden to your mental health, and a barrier to being free and happy and present. And I think that's where I'm most focused these days, is finding any barriers to me being present and trying to break them down. And the Refuge Recovery worldwide meetings absolutely offer help for anybody, regardless of like the severity of your addiction. So don't feel ashamed for seeking help for something, if you think it's not like a serious addiction. Like anything that's a barrier to your happiness, that you find yourself struggling to remove from your life or struggling to lessen, you can definitely find support for that.
Yes, I loved earlier too when you said, there are kind of like negative things that you can get addicted to, and there are positive things that you can get addicted to, but when there's not moderation, they become problematic. It doesn't matter how healthy they are, right? An exercise addiction, a food control addiction, which not necessarily eating nothing, but like eating super controlled calories, all of those things where you get dopamine from, like we said before, that cause that cascade where every time you do them, you get a little bit less dopamine and a little bit more pain from the withdrawal. Yeah. That constant withdrawal, that pain, discomfort can really sap a lot of the joy out of your life, because you start just looking for like how to get the next hit, right? How to exercise next, how to chop next, how to bite. It doesn't matter what it is. When you're solely focused on that, and like you said, not being present, that is diminishing the quality of the life that you could be having, and I think that affects so many people. I mean, we all have smartphones, we all have social media. Addiction's not a thing that just like affects a select few people, and it's like a hush thing that like don't talk about it. It only affects people who like aren't like me, or like whatever. It can affect anyone, and anyone could have a story like yours. Anyone can go through anything. It's like it's not a competition,
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely not a competition. I love that that sentence, because that's so important. Like measuring someone else's struggle against yours is not a proper measure for you to go get help. You're worthy of it no matter what.
Exactly. And I really feel like I've taken so much of your time.
That's okay.
We nearly did 2 hours. I think we were kind of expecting that it was going to be a long one. So I'll reiterate again, like it's a podcast. So I guess we're at the end now. So everyone's thinking like in retrospect, they could have, but we did mention, pause, take breaks, like do other things at the same time. That's like what I love about having a podcast. It's like I can put something out for 2 hours and you can digest it at whatever pace works for you, whatever pace is safe for you too.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me. It was fun to be here, fun to talk about this stuff, and a pleasure.
Have you thought of something to be grateful for today? What was it? I'm grateful for the amazing women that train with me at the Fight Back Project. I'm grateful for Nari and the beautiful song Shape Me heard at the beginning and end of every episode. And I'm grateful for you, for listening to this show and helping martial arts keep saving lives. So thank you from the bottom of my heart. If you'd like to leave me a review to help more people find the show, that's a bonus.
You need to know that nobody shapes me but me. Don't gotta tell you what my name is, I don't gotta explain it. Walk in the room, hear a boom erupting like I'm famous. I'm here shedding shells, I'm shameless. I fear nothing, no complacence. Walk walk too many tight ropes with no hope, so I became this poster they hold over all the heads of trauma holders. You don't need to know my history, I move boulders. Atlas shrug, cause I lifted the weight above his shoulders. No pretense of defense, move first like chess soldiers. This goes deeper than empowerment, cause I'm the one that power it. Physical meets mental, challenge me to keep devouring. If I can't change the scenery, at least I change perspectives. No longer isolated, but elevated and selective. Darkest places become beautiful spaces. This is where rage meets patience, meets power meets gracious. Meets, we're so glad you came and the feeling is contagious. When you the walking impact of intended bad intentions. When you the manifesting of collecting all they tensions. You the soul and body hold it all and still remember. But I'm a work in progress, testament to all contenders. Forgot what it was like to have control over self. Forgot what it was like to be the one in charge. Forgot in my reflection I could see all my wealth. Forgot that with my bare hands I break all these bars, barriers and obstacles. They can't cage me, they can't chronicle all my experiences and reduce them to appearances. When I was truly beaten, gave myself clearances to fall down, mess up, and get myself back up. I'm not looking for clovers cause I don't believe in luck. Damn, you were badass, I heard them say it clearly. Why thank you very much, I know now I'm not weary of what's next for me. Cause I expect to see growth like I was planted, watered, fed, and bloomed to be. The positivity and accountability, knowing they won't step if I'm the agent of my agency. I think I found my voice again, huh? I think I found my voice again, huh? I'm not sorry, you're the end where I begin. Boundaries, I know them well. Take a breath and meditate. Who is she? I know her well. Now I get to open gates. 1, 2, 1, 2. I don't need your permission. And if you get uncomfortable, then use your intuition to know that I won't stay where respect is ever missing. And everything I do, that's me making decisions. It's truly underrated, the value of self-worth. Forgot that I was rich from the moment of my birth. A penny from my thoughts, no really, you can't afford it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it, huh?